For decades, it really felt like the world was on a roll, making this incredible progress in the fight against extreme poverty. It was one of humanity's biggest success stories. But that story has taken a really sharp and honestly a worrying turn. What we're looking at today is something people are calling the Great Reversal, a massive setback that's actually pushing millions of people back into poverty and hunger.
All right, so let's just dive right in. The numbers here really paint a startling picture of this reversal. The data is pretty stark, and it shows exactly how much ground we've lost.
So here's the headline number, 712 million. That is the number of people living in what we call extreme poverty. And what does that mean? It means trying to survive on less than $2.15 a day. Can you even imagine trying to cover food, a place to live, everything you need with that? It's just an almost impossible task.
And here's the really crucial point. This isn't a static problem. That number is actually growing. It went up by 23 million people in just 3 years. So all that progress we might have taken for granted, it hasn't just stopped. It's literally gone into reverse. So, how did this happen? Well, it wasn't overnight. We started to see the pace of poverty reduction slow down around 2015. But then, of course, came the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was just a massive, massive blow. You combine that with other global shocks, things like conflict, rising inflation, and it basically wiped out 3 whole years of progress. And you know who it hit the hardest? Low-income countries.
But here's the thing about that $2 a day number. It doesn't really give you the full picture, not even close. If you want to truly understand what it means to be poor, you have to look so much deeper than just a single dollar amount.
Right, because poverty is more like this complex web of disadvantages that all kind of feed into each other. We're talking about not having access to basic healthcare, or a decent education, or even just clean water and electricity. It's about all the opportunities you're denied, right from the very beginning.
Okay, so if income by itself isn't enough, then how on earth do we measure all those other things, right? How do we measure the true depth of poverty? Well, it turns out there's a really powerful tool designed to do exactly that, and it gives us a much, much richer picture.
And this is it. It's called the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI for short. And this is where things get really insightful. It goes way beyond just asking, how much money do you make? It actually digs into the core things that make up a dignified life: your health, your education, and your basic everyday living standards.
And then here are the specifics. The MPI looks at 10 key things. It's asking these really fundamental questions like, is there enough food? Are kids actually getting to go to school? Does the family have clean drinking water? Electricity? A safe way to cook their food? You can see how each one of these tells a vital part of the story.
So here's how they define it. If you're falling short in at least a third of these areas, so 1/3 or more of those 10 indicators, you're considered MPI poor. And what this does is it lets us see who is getting hit with multiple overlapping problems all at once. And that is the true face of deep poverty.
Okay, I know this all sounds really bleak, but it is not all bad news. There is absolutely a reason for hope. And to see what's actually possible when there's focused effort, let's turn to one of the most incredible poverty reduction stories maybe ever. 415 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. In just a decade and a half, India lifted that many people out of poverty. That's more than the entire population of the United States. It is a truly monumental, mind-boggling achievement.
And India isn't some outlier. It's actually one of 25 countries, we're talking places like Cambodia, China, Vietnam, that successfully cut their MPI value in half in just 15 years. This is so important because it's a huge reminder that the setbacks we're seeing right now, they don't have to be permanent. This isn't destiny.
Now, you really can't talk about poverty without talking about hunger. The two are just so deeply connected, and unfortunately, the trends we're seeing here are just as alarming.
So get this, in 2022, an estimated 735 million people were facing hunger. Let that sink in. That's almost 1 out of every 10 people on the entire planet. The scale of this is it's hard to even wrap your head around.
And just like with poverty, we see that same devastating pattern from the last few years. That number is 122 million people higher than it was before the pandemic. It just goes to show you, the shockwaves from these global crises, they're being felt right at the dinner table.
And if you look at this chart, you can see that while hunger is definitely a global problem, it doesn't hit everywhere equally. Some places carry a much, much heavier burden. Take Africa, for example. An astounding 1 in 5 people, that's 20% of the entire continent, is facing hunger. That's more than double the rate we see in Asia.
And if we peel back another layer of this crisis, we find these hidden inequalities. All around the world, women are more likely to be food insecure than men. It's a really clear example of how these big crises tend to make existing problems even worse, leaving the most vulnerable people even further behind.
And of course, the toll this takes on children is just devastating. In 2022 alone, 148 million kids were stunted. That means their growth was permanently harmed by not having enough nutrition. Another 45 million were what's called wasted, which means they were dangerously thin. This isn't just a problem for right now. This is something that will scar our collective future.
So, we've got these two massive crises, poverty and hunger, and they're both moving in the wrong direction. What in the world does this mean for the big global goals we've set? What does the road ahead look like?
Well, here's the really sobering assessment. That huge, ambitious goal of ending extreme poverty by 2030, a promise that every single country in the world signed on to, well, on the path we're on right now, it looks like it's simply out of reach.
And the projection for hunger is just as grim. The estimates show that even by 2030, we're looking at nearly 600 million people still dealing with chronic undernourishment. That's hundreds of millions of people who will be left behind.
And that really brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? We live in a world now where these huge global shocks, pandemics, conflicts, the effects of climate change, they're just becoming more and more common. So what we used to do might not be enough anymore. Those success stories like India, they show us what's possible. But the sheer scale of this reversal, it demands something new, a new level of urgency, a new level of action. So the real question is, what is it going to take to finally get back on track?